So I'm Jeff Rabin. I'm an attorney in private practice, and all I do in my law practice is help people who are disabled and are trying to get benefits from the Social Security Administration. I started out in 1980 as an associate in a general law practice downtown, and I got stuck with the Social Security work because no one else in my office wanted to either deal with the clientele or the bureaucracy. As time went on, I found I liked the clientele and I liked the bureaucracy a whole lot more than I like other lawyers. And the nice thing about my work is I don't have to deal with other lawyers. So I started focusing just on Social Security work and started my own practice actually in 1988. I represent people all over the country. I've had discussions like this with groups all over the country. Jennifer told you a little of my history. This is my thing. I'm going to promise you all three things tonight. Number one, nobody will fall asleep. And if you try to, I do keep the rubber band up here. And I got a guy from the Epilepsy Foundation once right in his forehead and got his attention again. Number two, if you just talk with me here tonight, now I'm here to talk. I'm not here to lecture. I'm here to discuss. If you just talk with me tonight and follow our handout, I guarantee that you will know more about Social Security law than 98% of the lawyers on the street because they know nothing. Number three, except in one instance when I will tell you it is okay, you will not call Social Security's 1-800 number again. It is run by morons. And I'll say that on tape. You are as liable to get outright false information as you are to get help. At least that's been my personal experience with the 1-800 number. And you won't need that again as we go forward, except for, like I said, one instance when I will tell you it's okay to use that. What we're going to do this evening is we're going to follow in our handout, and we're going to discuss what it means to be totally disabled under the Social Security Act. We're going to talk about what SSDI means and what SSI means and what the differences are, because those are important as you try to protect your future. We're going to talk about how Social Security thinks about cases, because they do think about every single case, just not always accurately. We're going to talk about what's key to getting your claims approved. We're going to talk about the best ways to file and appeal a claim through the process, and how just by talking with me here tonight, you're going to learn how to save 4 months in processing time. And 4 months in this lengthy program for somebody who's totally disabled with no income can be a game changer. So you'll know how to cut 4 months out of that processing time just from talking with me here tonight. And then we're going to talk about what's really the most important part of the program, and that's how to go back to work on Social Security. See, Social Security was never intended to support anybody. Social Security retirement was never intended to support retirees. It was intended to supplement your own family savings and resources. Social Security disability, for most of our clients, we try to look at as a time program, giving them time to treat, time to recover, time to retrain, and then time to return to the workforce. And there are very good return to work rules built into the Social Security Act. People don't understand them and are afraid to use them. By the time we're done here tonight, you will understand them and you won't be afraid to use them, and you'll be able to go back into the workforce without jeopardizing your benefits or without causing those nasty overpayments. I want you to follow in the handouts. If you have questions, don't hesitate to interrupt me. Now, because of Jennifer, I did put on the lawyer's costume today, and because it's videotaped, and I really, when I walked in here, I said, all right, I'll leave the lawyer's costume on for the whole evening, but truly, I can't do this. I'm just not that comfortable. So if you all don't mind, I'd really rather get more comfortable so that we can go to work. And we're going to start out on page 3 of the handout. My web guy's going to probably kill me for not having my jacket on something on the web, but oh well. And we're going to talk about what it means to be totally disabled. In order for me to get somebody SSDI or SSI benefits, I've got to prove the existence of a permanent physical or mental impairment producing symptoms so severe it precludes the ability to perform any substantial gainful activity for a period that's lasted or expected to last at least 12 months. See, she was going to write that down. Is just getting an pen all ready. If you got half, you're ahead of most people. So that's a lot of legal mumble jumble. Let's talk about what it means. In order for me to get somebody disability benefits, I have to be able to prove that they are suffering from symptoms which so impact their day-to-day life that they could not function at any type of full-time work activity. I do not have to necessarily prove diagnoses. Diagnoses are generally not determinative. I get calls all day from people who say, Mr. Rabin, I have high blood pressure and sugar diabetes and I want to get SSI. And my response is, so what? Take your medicine, watch your diet, and go to work. Because those conditions do not typically produce symptoms which so impact function that these people couldn't do a simple job. So the focus in a Social Security disability case is not on the diagnosis, it's on the symptoms that come from that diagnosis and how they impact your day-to-day life. People with diabetes work. People with AIDS work. People with multiple sclerosis work. People with cancer work. So the fact of the diagnosis, except in a few instances, and we will get to the compassion and allowance issues in a little bit, but except in those instances, it's not the label that matters. It's the symptoms from that label and how those symptoms impact function. So if somebody calls me up and they have a physical medical problem, a bad back or a bad heart or a breathing problem or a shoulder problem, what are the symptoms from that physical medical condition and how do they impact her ability to do the physical motions of work? Sitting in a chair, standing, walking, lifting, reaching, pushing, pulling, those physical motions that are involved in every single job, how are they impacted by the symptoms from whatever label the doctor put on them? If we're dealing with somebody with a mental impairment, major depression, anxiety disorder, PTSD, agoraphobia, the diagnosis of the day seems to be bipolar, what are the symptoms of that mental impairment, and how do those symptoms impact the ability to do the basic mental motions of a job? Understanding and remembering simple instructions, interacting appropriately with coworkers, supervisors, and the public, dealing with ordinary work stressors and changes on the job. These basic mental motions that are involved in every single occupation, how are they impacted by the symptoms from whatever label the psychiatrist or the psychologist placed on this person? Every Social Security case boils down to the analysis of those symptoms. Social Security rarely denies the diagnosis. A guy's got a scar 6 inches down the middle of his back. He had a back fusion. Social Security's not denying that he had a back fusion. What they're saying is, so what? What can he still do on a sustained basis despite his back fusion? And they call that in their lingo your residual functional capacity to perform work-related activities, your RFC, what you can still do despite your medical problems on a full-time basis. We're going to come back to that phrase RFC a couple of times tonight. So let's take an example. Let's take a 48-year-old guy in Chicago who's a union carpenter. Last time I checked, it was a little while ago, they were making around $31, $32 an hour scale plus benefits. He's climbing up the scaffold falls on top of him, he herniates a couple of discs in his lower back, and he needs a back fusion. He's not going to be a carpenter again because he's not going to be able to bend and saw and throw 2x4s over one shoulder and climb with one hand and do all the things that a carpenter needs to do. But that's not the issue at Social Security. Social Security is a total disability program. Whether he could do his own occupation at age 48 is not determinative. In his case, I need to prove why he couldn't function at a job like ticket taker at a movie theater. It's a sit-stand option job. There's no bending or lifting. He just rips tickets in half. And he says, door number 2 is the latest George Clooney show. Enjoy the show. Ticket taker at a movie theater, coin changer at a self-service gas station, shoebox packer in the back of a shoe store, washing machine unloader in a laundromat. Social Security has used all of these kinds of jobs to deny my clients benefits in the past. A number of years ago, I was representing a lady who was a cardiac intensive care nurse here in Chicago, zapping people like you see on TV to start their heart and save lives. And she developed rheumatoid arthritis, and this was before the biologics were all out. And so she developed 2 claw hands as a result of the disease. Social Security denied her application, stating that she had the RFC to be a bicycle rental clerk. Back in the days when you could represent substance abusers, and I was very active working with the substance abuse community. I was a consultant at the Gateway Foundation and several other different substance abuse programs in the area. And I was representing a fellow who was in the Kedzie house who had a heroin problem, and they denied his claim, saying that he retained the RFC to be a bank vault security guard. Now, when I told Henry the heroin addict they wanted him to guard the bank vault, he said, "Mr. Rabin, I wish how I wish." The point of the stories, my lady was not going to go rent bikes at Oak Street Beach, and Henry wasn't going to get a job guarding the bank vault. But that's not the test. The test was whether I could prove that they could not function at those jobs on a full-time basis because of whatever their medical problems were. So if you want to write down one word in your handout, you go to page 4, and you'll see a desk that looks like mine and makes my secretary groan every time she comes in. You can write down one word that will summarize everything that we've talked about so far, and that word is the word do. These cases do not turn generally on labels. They turn on what the evidence reflects this person could still do on a sustained basis despite that medical problem. And my staff's job all day is to gather that evidence, which are the medical records and charts, and review and analyze them to determine what are the documented symptoms and how do those symptoms impact this particular client's ability to function. So this basic law, proving for at least 12 months, because that's the minimum time period, that our clients are suffering from symptoms that so impact their ability to function that they couldn't sustain work, applies to 2 basic programs. There's a bunch of subsets, but we're going to just hit the highlights. The first program is called Social Security Disability Insurance, or Title II, or SSDI, or Regular Disability, or Workers' Disability. We're going to call it SSDI tonight. And the other program is Title 16 of the Social Security Act, called Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, and we'll call that one SSI. So we have SSDI and SSI. We're going to talk first about SSDI because it is the more comprehensive of the programs. SSDI, and we're now on page 5. It's not a problem. We're on page 5. SSDI has 2 requirements. The first requirement is the medical test, which we just talked about before this poor lady came in late, and now I'm going to pick on her for a while. The second requirement is you must have purchased the insurance, Social Security Disability Insurance. This is an insurance plan, and it is no different than your car insurance and your homeowner's insurance, your health insurance, and your life insurance. Now, she's thinking, I know I write my car insurance check out to Allstate, and I know the boss takes some of the health insurance premiums out of my paycheck. I don't ever remember writing out a check to Social Security. But everyone in this room has, because everyone in this room is old enough to have had a job, and I'm presuming has worked at some point in their life. And if you're like my staff, the deal you made with the boss is for not enough money, you work too many hours and under too much stress. But that's the typical deal. The problem is the boss has never kept his end of the bargain, because not one of you has ever gotten a paycheck for what the boss promised. And the reason is every time you've gotten that paycheck, it's had a stub on it. Now, the top line on your stub says federal withholding, and that's the money that goes off to Washington, D.C., and it pays for the Army and the Navy and the Air Force and the Smithsonian Institute and for John Boehner and Barack Obama to play golf and never get anything done. And then you've got the bottom line on your check stub. That says state withholding. That's the money that goes down to Springfield, and truly only the Lord knows what happens to it down there. We know some of it goes to build roads and bridges. We know some of it goes to build big prisons that sit empty in the middle of the state for $100 million. And we know that not enough of it goes to Medicaid, mental health, and public schools, which are other issues and interests of mine. And then you've got the line in the middle for the money that goes over the rainbow to the land of FICAville. Now, some of you remember when it said actually FICA on the check stub. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about. And it now says Social Security. It says Social Security, Disability, Retirement, Insurance Benefits. And the other line says Medicare. But those combined are FICA. Every dollar taken out of your paycheck for FICA, the boss matches. So she goes into her purse and she takes out $1. And then the money goes out to the Social Security trust funds in Washington, D.C. Now, give me a name, yours or any name you want to use. Ethan. Keith, I'm sorry. So there's no bank account for Keith. Keith's FICA payments and those monies from his boss, they don't go into a savings account. They're not invested for him. He doesn't have money the government owes him. He doesn't have a pot that's being invested and gaining interest. The money gets split up amongst 3 large trust funds. Now, the biggest, the one that eats up most of the money, Social Security Retirement. And then there's a little one off to the side, and a little is in the billions, and that's called Social Security Disability. And there's another little one, again in the billions, off to the other side, and that's called Medicare. And that's how these programs are funded. Keith's FICA payments, along with the matches from his boss, go into the trust funds. They're immediately paid out. So those of you or who have family members who are getting Social Security retirement or disability benefits, you're actually getting the money that Keith and his boss sent in last month, so you ought to send him a little thank you note. And then whatever is left over at the end of the term is loaned to the U.S. Treasury so they could lie to us about the actual size of the U.S. deficit, because if they ever included what they owed the trust funds, very few people would have any faith in the government. The issue with the trust funds right now is that there's not much left over. There's nothing left over because all the money that's going in is being paid out in benefits, and they're actually eating up into the principal. That's a whole other discussion we can have. In order to qualify for SSDI, you have to meet a 2-part FICA test. First, you had to have worked and paid FICA taxes for 40 quarters in your lifetime, or 10 years. Second, you must have worked and paid FICA taxes for 5 of the 10 years prior to the date you became totally disabled. Their lingo, 20 quarters of the 40 quarters preceding the onset of disability. Let's take an example. Jennifer made me put on the lawyer's costume today. Okay, you're going to learn a lot about me tonight. One of the things is I am the world's greatest klutz, and the lawyer's costume comes with shoes with ties. Bad decision. I go out in the parking lot after we do our talk tonight. I trip on my shoelace. I fall and bang my head. She gets nervous. She rushes me over to Highland Park Hospital, and they do a brain scan. They say, oh, my God, he's more brain damaged than when he got to the Cancer Wellness Center, and now I'm totally disabled. I live way up north in Lake County, so my Social Security office would be Waukegan. So I would go to Waukegan and say, because of Jennifer, I'm now more brain damaged, and I want to apply for disability insurance. Their computer is going to call the IRS computer, and it's going to say, has Jeff worked and paid FICA taxes for at least 10 years in his lifetime? Okay, I was thinking about it the other day. I've actually been working more than 40 years, which sounded really scary and old to me. So I qualify. Then they're going to say, for the second part of the test, pull Jeff's earnings records from 2003 through 2013, the 10 years prior to the year I became totally disabled, Has Jeff worked and paid FICA taxes for at least 5 of those years, or at least 20 quarters during that time period? If I have, I've purchased Social Security disability insurance coverage. If I've only worked 18 quarters in that time period, or for 2 years, or I worked for cash and never paid the man a dime, I'll have screwed myself because I wouldn't have purchased the insurance. Okay? 10 years lifetime, 5 of the 10 years prior to the date I became totally disabled, I'm eligible for SSDI. If so, I will get a monthly check. The amount of that check is a computer formula, which factors in my age, earnings, and how much I paid into the system. It's a very long formula. Average person on Social Security disability this year is supporting her family on about $1,170 a month. Dependent kids get benefits until age 16 or 18 and graduate high school. You get a cost of living increase each year. It's minimal. It's under attack in Congress for being too large. The president had agreed to modify it, to decrease it going into the future, but he's backed off of that, fortunately. But you do get last year I think it was 3.5% or 3.7%. It's always far less than the increasing costs of energy, medical care, and housing, which are the biggest issues to retirees and the disabled. You become eligible on SSDI for Medicare 29 months after the date of onset. Now, this gets described lots of different ways on the street, so let me tell it to you the right way. So we're now in July of 2014, and I fall and get hurt. I become disabled today. In the SSDI program, I do not get benefits until the end of what they call a 5-month elimination period. We call it a 5-month starvation period. So I will not get benefits for August, September, October, November, December. My first check on SSDI, no matter how sick I am, is going to be January of 2015. Medicare will kick in January of 2017. 2 years, 5 months from the date I'm found to be totally disabled, the date I became totally disabled. 2 exceptions to that rule. People on kidney dialysis can get it earlier. People with Lou Gehrig's disease can get it earlier. One reason for those exceptions, better lobbyists. There's no other reason. That's the reason. Those are the basics of the SSDI program. Totally disabled, worked and paid FICA taxes. Turn the page and let's talk about SSI. What is nice is to be in a room where there are some people, in fact, most people maybe, who remember Look in Life magazines. But I give this talk a lot, and a lot of times it's to rooms of students or young social workers and case managers, and I mention Look in Life magazines. They know the vaguest idea of what this guy over here has no clue what I'm talking about. But these were nice, big magazines that told great pictures with great stories with photographs. And in 1971, there was a series of stories about the difference in elderly living conditions in the North, where people were getting some support from their townships and their states and their communities, and the elderly living conditions down in the South, where they were not getting any help, and they were living in shanties and lean-tos, and there were pictures of the elderly eating out of cat food tins. Congress decided that was a bad thing, so they enacted this supplemental security income program to help the elderly poor, and then expanded it to help the disabled poor. So SSI also has 2 requirements. First is the exact same medical test that we talked about at the beginning of our discussion before this poor lady came in late and missed it. Second, you must be indigent. Indigent for SSI purposes means no money coming into the household other than possibly TANF benefits or child support, and less than $2,000 in non-excludable resources. Non-excludable resources, what do we mean? You're allowed a car in order to get to the doctor. You're allowed one house that you're living in order not to be homeless. They won't value the clothes on your back, but they will look inside your purse. They will look inside your wallet. They will look for savings accounts, checking accounts, investment accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 203Bs, cash value life insurance, U.S. savings bonds, poorly drafted family trusts, investment properties, any asset that can be converted into cash, even if you have to pay a tax or a penalty to access it, counts against the $2,000 limitation. They did amend the law a number of years ago to allow people to have graves, but when I first started doing this work, people would literally have to sell or cash in their burial insurance or sell their grave sites in order to be under the $2,000 limitation. Yes, sir?
What is TANF?
Transitional Assistance to Needy Families. So that's the old public aid benefits. It's the old AFTC. It's temporary benefits now to families with young children. If you're totally disabled and you meet those financial limitations and you're living independently, you'll receive an SSI benefit of $721 a month, plus food stamps and a Medicaid card. That leaves a totally disabled, indigent person in the United States still living 25% below the poverty level. Now, there is a big problem with the SSI program, and that problem results from a concept called deeming, and I want to spend a moment talking about what that means. Deeming says, what belongs to my wife belongs to me, penalty on her. What belongs to me belongs to my wife, and what belongs to the two of us belongs to our minor children. So I'm going to give you an example now, and this is an example that probably has happened in my practice 2 to 3 times a month for 30 years. So I'm one guy sitting in a corner office in Des Plaines. So if you can imagine that this has happened this frequently to me, you can multiply it out and see how this problem affects the whole country. Here's the story. And this is not a made-up story. This is a compilation of many, many, many calls and emails. Lady goes to school and graduates, we're going to say in the late 80s. She goes to work. She does very well. She meets Mr. Wonderful. He's rocking in the tech world and the IT companies. He's making tons of money. They meet, they get married. He's doing so well. She decides, what the heck, I'm going to do what I want to do. I'm going to be a stay-at-home mom. And they have 1, 2, 3 little girls, and she's happy to stay home and raise the kids. We get into the 90s. The tech business changes. He goes from the high-flying companies to a nice, stable, mature company where he's doing well. But then we go into the 2000s, and that company is bought out, he's laid off, and he's now working for a 6-person little consulting firm. Well, now their kids have grown up, and the oldest one is 24 and out of school. The next one's 22, and she's a senior. The other one is 20 and is a sophomore. And in this 6-man consulting firm, they stopped paying for health insurance coverage for the family because truly no small business can afford all the health insurance for the family. And when you have 3 kids in college, you can't spend that kind of extra money. So they kept him insured, but none of the others. She's now 48 years old, and she comes to me because she's been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, or she's been in a terrible car accident, or she's got breast cancer. Let's use multiple sclerosis. It's an easy one. And she says, hey, Jeff, I don't have health insurance. I want to get into the MS clinic at Rush because I really like those doctors at that program. Can you get me SSDI and a Medicare card so that I can go in and see those doctors? I can't get her SSDI and a Medicare card. How come? She hasn't worked for 5 of the last 10 years and paid FICA taxes. She stayed home raising the kids. And she says, well, can you at least get me SSI and a Medicaid card so that I can get my Avonex because Avonex will stop me from losing my legs, but that injection is $1,000 a month. I can't get her SSI and Medicaid. How come? Husband's income is deemed to her. We don't provide her access to the health care system. Now, some of this has changed with the Affordable Care Act, but we don't know where the Affordable Care Act is actually going to end up landing after all these recent court decisions and things. But until the Affordable Care Act, the United States of America provided no access to the health care system for that particular woman. Bottom line is, in the United States of America, stay-at-home moms who get sick get screwed because they have no access to this system. Then the story goes on. And again, I'm not making any of this up. Husband looks at her and says, "You're sick. You're not fun anymore." And he's out the door. Now, he's saved $250,000, $300,000 in 401ks and profit-sharing plan benefits, and she gets half of that in the divorce for her old age. Still can't get SSI until she either does some very expensive and extensive estate planning, or she cracks the IRAs, pays the taxes, pays the 10% penalty, blows it down below $2,000, then we'll give her $721 a month to live on. The Affordable Care Act is a big game changer. For example, in that last scenario, the fact that she has money in the IRAs would not stop her from getting a Medicaid card now. You get a Medicaid card in Illinois as long as your income is under $15,800 a year. So that's a game changer. Now, not every state has adopted that expanded Medicaid program. It's a state-by-state decision. Fortunately, we're in a state that made that choice. I really empathize with people in the states where the government wasn't so farsighted.
What was it before, if you remember?
So before the Affordable Care Act, you could only get a Medicaid card if you fit a category. And the categories were over 65 and poor, pregnant, having a small child living with you, or if you're totally disabled. But their definition of totally disabled was very difficult to meet because you didn't have an insurance card to go to the doctor to prove your problems. So people like these women that I'm describing, and I've talked to hundreds in my career, were left out in the cold, just routinely. So I'm a big fan of the Affordable Care Act in concept. I'm a big fan of the Affordable Care Act in some of the ways it's been applied, especially with expanded Medicaid. No one knows what the long-term ramifications are going to be, but I believe anything that provides people in the United States with access to the health care system is an important advancement, and I've seen it really help my clients a great deal. So that was a little bit off topic. SSDI. Worked and paid FICA taxes and became totally disabled. SSI, totally disabled, and indigent, those are the two main programs. Now, what we've done so far is we've talked about what they call in law school black letter law, big law. But these are big concepts. They're refined by something called regulations, and the regulations are issued by Social Security, and that's pages and pages and pages and pages of fine print. The regulations are then refined by something called the Program Operation Manual System, which at the hearing level is redefined by something called the HALEX. Social Security then issues something called rulings to change all of that law, and then all of that is then reinterpreted by the federal courts. So in my little niche area of practice, there's lots of law. We're going to talk for a moment about in the regulations, because in the regulations, there is an analytical framework that is used by every single decision maker. Whether your case is at initial or reconsideration or all the way up in the federal courts, everybody applies the same 5-step analysis, and they call it the sequential evaluation procedure. But I hope by now you've realized that I'm not your typical lawyer. I'm a roofer's kid. The only reason I became a lawyer is I was so bad at roofing, my dad threw me out of the family business. But truthfully, the best things in the whole world to me are the smell of hot tar and the rattle of ladders, because that reminds me of everything I had growing up. So I don't talk about the sequential evaluation procedure, because if I say that more than twice a day, my tongue goes on strike. I talk about climbing a ladder. So let's talk about climbing the ladder, and we're now on page 7. Thank you for having that there. Ground floor of the ladder, new program, new in the last several years. It's called compassionate allowances. Compassionate allowances was a program started by former Commissioner Astru, where he said, you know, there are certain conditions that we just pay all the time. So why should we put people through this nonsense? Let's just, if they have these conditions, we know we're going to pay them. Started out with a list of 35. Now I believe the latest list is 185. I brought copies of this for all of you, so I'll give this to you before you leave tonight. I have a bunch of things. I don't want to give them to you now because I want you paying attention to me and not reading them. But you can get the list of compassionate allowances on Social Security's website, which is www.ssa.gov. That's in your handout. If you have one of these conditions, you are supposed to be put into pay status within 2 weeks. Now that means your case is approved. You still have to go through the 5-month waiting period from your onset date before benefits will actually be awarded to you or actually get checks. But the application itself should be approved very quickly. Most of the conditions in the compassionate allowance list are things you've never heard of, very esoteric conditions, things that never even come in my office with all the people I've talked with in 30-plus years of doing this. But there are a number of cancers on there. And especially, and we're going to talk about this in more in a few moments, but cancers that have metastasized, that's the magic word at Social Security. But brain cancers are on there, lung cancers are on there. So if you have some of these conditions, all you need to do is get a letter from your doctor with the diagnosis and a one-paragraph discussion, go to the Social Security office, say out loud compassionate allowance. People are supposed to come running, not literally, and the application should get approved within a couple of weeks. This is the only time I want you to go to the office to apply as opposed to doing it on the computer, because on the computer it goes one way. When you go face-to-face and do a compassionate allowance, it goes another way, and it'll get approved the way it should. Yes, ma'am?
Does this matter if you've worked in the last 5 years?
Same rules for eligibility. Yes, exact same rules. It's not that compassionate. It'd be nice if it was. That's actually a great question. No one's asked that.
Like for housewives?
No. Still all the same rules for SSDI and SSI apply. We're only talking now about how Social Security thinks about cases once they get past those preliminary discussions. Assuming you don't have a compassionate allowance case, the first step on the ladder asks, are you engaged in SGA? Make it simpler. Are you engaged in substantial gainful activity? Make it simpler. Are you working? Make it simpler yet. Are you engaged in any full or part-time activity that's generating at least $1,070 a month in gross income? That's the definition of work this year. And it changes every year, which is good because Jennifer then has to bring me back every year to do this talk. So if you're working full or part-time and making $1,070 gross in a month, you're not going to be considered totally disabled unless there's some rare exception like a family business, sympathetic employment situation. Generally, though, that income will bar you, and the case will be denied at step 1. Assuming you're not, we go to step 2 on the ladder, which asks, does the medical evidence show that this condition somehow at least minimally affects work functioning? Because remember, these cases are all about what you can do, how you can function. Some people applying their conditions really don't impact on function, or they aren't going to impact on function for a year, and that's when these get ruled out. So this is where the high blood pressure or the sinusitis cases often get ruled out at step 2. A broken leg that heals in 12 months is going to get denied at step 2. It's to rule out those people that really shouldn't have applied, need to go back to work. The best example of what's a non-severe impairment, though, that really brings home the point is epilepsy controlled by medication. Now, epilepsy is a serious medical problem. But remember, we're not talking about labels, we're talking about symptoms. So if you're taking your phenobarbital or Dilantin or whatever the current medication is and you're not having seizures, you're not having symptoms that don't impact on your work in a significant way, and actually that's how seizure cases get denied at step 2 as being considered non-severe. Serious medical problems, non-severe for work function issues. Assuming your condition does impact on function, we then go to step 3, which asks, oh my gosh, is this condition so bad we're going to stop the analysis and award benefits because the evidence shows that it meets or equals the listings of impairments. The listings of impairments are very precise medical guidelines contained in the regulations. Very hard to meet them. We've had over 50 clients in our offices die before Social Security said they couldn't work, and even some of those they still kept on fighting us on. There's listings for all types of medical problems, listings for musculoskeletal problems, listings for cardiac problems, pulmonary problems, mental health issues. There's a whole section on cancer. There's a section for systemic problems like HIV and lupus and scleroderma. Cut my arm off, I don't meet the listing. Cut my arm and my leg off, and I'm a double amputee, and I do meet the listing. So this is a very high threshold. But if you do meet it, the case will be awarded at step 3 on the ladder. Analysis stops. Anybody that calls our office, in our head, we're going through the listing requirements, trying to see if we can use that as our first basis for getting somebody approved. But assuming we can't, we then go to step 4 on the ladder. And step 4 says, okay, we know you're not working. We know you have a condition that does impact on your function at step 2. We know it's not so bad it meets the listings at step 3. Well, considering your RFC, what you can still do you retain the functional ability to do any of the kinds of jobs that you've done in the last 15 years? That's the past relevant work period. So, what's your name?
Suzanne.
So, Suzanne may have worked at the steel mills, and those jobs are all in South Korea. Or Suzanne may have worked at Zenith, and those jobs are down in Mexico. Or more likely, Suzanne may have worked at the Hallmark store down the street, and that lady says, I wouldn't have Suzanne back here for all the tea in China. It doesn't matter whether Suzanne could get those jobs. The issue is whether she retains the functional capability of doing any of the kinds of jobs she's done in the last 15 years. If she does, we lose at step 4. If she does not, and we can prove she can't do her past relevant work, we go to the last step, or step 5 of the ladder, which says, we know she's not working, we know she's got a severe impairment, we know it's not so bad it meets the listings, we know it's bad enough it stops past relevant work. Now, considering her age, her education, her work history, and her RFC, residual functional capacity, are there other kinds of jobs that she can perform full-time in the national economy? If there are, we lose. If there are not, we've achieved getting her benefits. And this is when we fight with the ticket taker job and the bank teller job and things like that. Yes, sir.
This is irrespective of whether or not those jobs are really available?
Yes. It does not matter whether somebody could get the job, get to the job. The jobs, so what the law says technically is Social Security does have to be able to prove that those jobs exist in significant numbers in the regional economy. So our region here is considered the 9-county metropolitan area, and the courts have held that if a vocational expert for Social Security can identify a job that has 700 positions scattered anywhere from Gary, Indiana to Rockford, that counts as a significant number in our area. So it's really proving that people basically can't function. Arguing numbers is almost an impossible win at Social Security. We don't fight that battle. Let's spend a moment, and I guess since we're at the Cancer Wellness Center, it would be appropriate to talk about the cancer listings. So let's go to page 8. So let's talk real fast about the most difficult cancer call that we get, and the one that ultimately we have to turn down most of the time, and that's the breast cancer case. So let's talk about why we have to turn that down and what the issue is, and then we'll talk about the listings. The typical call I get on breast cancer, and this might not be your case, but this is the typical call I get, is a woman goes to the doctor because she has a lump or some abnormality. Doctor does the biopsy, says she has cancer. Doctor does the surgery, either a lumpectomy or mastectomy. We have a period of time for recovery from the surgery. Then they start chemotherapy. Then they start radiation. Experience now shows that that whole process is about 8 months for most of the women that call. Remember, I said to be totally disabled, the minimum time period is 12 months. It's very rare and difficult for me to get oncologists to go the extra 4 months after treatment stops. So even though you could be totally laid out for those 8 months because of the side effects of the treatment and the recovery from the surgery, if your ongoing symptoms are not so bad for the remaining 4 months that we at least get that year, we can't get people benefits for breast cancer. It was different 20 years ago when I started. It was the best example of the difference between back when I started and now are bypass surgeries. When I got calls for somebody, a guy who was 55 years old and they had a heart attack and was having bypass surgery back in the 80s, that was an easy case. No doctor wanted him to go back within a year. Now I don't even take those calls because no doctor wants him to be off work more than 4 to 6 weeks. And it's just a change in the technology.
Okay, I have a question for you. Now, you said the most they go back is 8 months. I actually been off work 18 months. Okay? And Social Security has denied me twice. So I'm in the process of, they told me a year. I'm in the process right now of waiting for a hearing.
Okay.
Okay, but through my insurance, through my company, because they're still paying my benefits, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Nope, that's...
They actually have a lawyer because when I first got on long-term disability, they actually made me go and apply for it just in case I would be off longer when I first was off in the beginning. So now it's been 18 months. I have restrictions that my doctor has given me. So when I did a job assessment at work, they came back to me and said they're unable to accommodate my restrictions. That's because I'm a manager. They're looking at my age and the cost that the cancer has cost in insurance. And I understand that. And my doctor said to me, well, you know, I don't know what they want from me, my firstborn, because they're always seeing her paperwork and stuff. So she said to me, my last visit, she said, well, you might as well accept it. It's a business decision that they actually make because they take into consideration your age and how long it's going to be before you retire and stuff like that. So I'm like stuck right now. You know, I've been at the company 13 years. You know, I'm not quite at retirement age, but I do have the amount of credits and stuff like that, you know, to be able to get disability. So where does it lead me? Do I just lose my job? I don't get disability, you know, because at some point the insurance is going to stop. Nothing lasts forever. So.
Okay, so lots and lots of issues in there. So let's break some of this down. Let's first distinguish between the long-term disability plan that you had at your company and Social Security disability because they are different programs. The long-term disability program did exactly what you said. The company said, we have this benefit for you. You're going to be out more than 90 days or 6 months, whatever the particular plan requirements are. You applied for the long-term disability. They agreed that you could not perform your occupation. It's an own, they call it own oc in their trade, own occupation. So for at least 2 years, most, and every plan is different, so I'm going to generalize, most corporate or private long-term disability plans will pay you if you can't do your own occupation. That is not Social Security's test. Social Security's test is much broader and says you have to be able to prove that you're unable to perform any type of work considering your age, education, work skills, and your RFC, what your residual functional capacity is. Now, as a manager, you had a lot of skills that Social Security considered sedentary type jobs, sit-down type jobs that don't involve standing, walking, or lifting very great weights. So what you're going to have to be able to do to win your Social Security disability claim is prove that for at least 12 months you had symptoms so severe that you couldn't even do a sit-down type occupation on a 40-hour-a-week basis. So different tests, different programs. In terms of your job, according to the Supreme Court, the company can fire you when you go on long-term disability. Your company apparently has been very good to you and has not, but most companies do. And that's because they want to terminate profit sharing and 401k contributions, health insurance responsibilities, things like that. So we're good with your company right there. So now you're going to go appear before the judge. We'll talk about that more in a moment. But the focus is going to be on what your ongoing symptoms have been and how they impact your day-to-day life.
Thank you.
I have at one point in time I told my son, it seems like this is so difficult, we should just split now because it seems impossible from the things you're going through. And then luckily for us, we hit the jackpot with brain cancer.
Okay, that's look.
So, 7 months. We've been going through this for 7 months now. Is there, the first surgery 7 months ago, and another surgery coming up? Is it retroactive? Or from what you're saying, we're running down to Social Security on Monday and applying, and we should get compassionate, whatever. And is it retroactive? Would it be from then, or what? How does that work?
Okay. So now, this is why at the very beginning of the talk, I distinguish between SSDI and SSI because the rules are different. So we're going to presume that you're filing for SSDI. SSDI benefits will go back to the date you became totally disabled, but no more than 1 year prior to the date you file your application. So let's take your scenario. I'm going to make up some dates now. We're in July of 2014. Let's pretend you stopped working on January 1 of 2014. So if Social Security finds you disabled right now, they will go back and say you became disabled on January 1. Because it was the first of the month, they'll count that month. So January, February, March, April, May will be your waiting or elimination period months. So your checks would start June 1 of 2014. Medicare will kick in June 1 of 2016. Different facts. Let's say you stopped working January 1 of last year, 2013, but you're not applying until July of 2014. Social Security won't go back more than 1 year prior to the application, so the most they'd go back with benefits is to July of 2013, even though your 5-month waiting period would have ended in June of 2013. You'd have lost some money because you waited too long. SSI never goes back further than the month after the month you apply. So even if you were disabled a year ago, if you applied today, your first check would be August of 2014.
So in terms of the 12-month period, though, that she'll be unable to work, is that 12 months forward from today, or can we go back?
12 months from the date of onset. So if he had a fall or had a seizure or had something that said, oh my gosh, he's really ill, and that's when we identify the date of onset, and that's January 1. So the 12-month period goes from the date of onset. The date of onset when symptoms made work impossible. Yes, ma'am.
Waiting for an appeal, does it take 12 to 18 months before they actually do the appeal? Or hearing, I should say.
The answer is generally in this area where we're at now, where we're in the north suburbs, so our hearing office here is in Evanston. It varies. Like last year, the time frame went way up because of sequestration. You remember what that deal that Boehner and Obama made? It was devastating to the Social Security program, especially here in Illinois. Processing times went way back up last year. We're telling people it's about 18 months for the Evanston hearing office from the time you start your case until the time you finally see a judge. That's on average. Some judges are a little quicker, some are a little slower. Reconsideration, which went way up last year because of sequestration, they now have more staffing, so they're decreasing some of those time periods a little bit. The goal at Social Security is to decrease all the time periods. The problem is There's just a lot of cases. There's just the recession brought in a lot of people applying who shouldn't have applied, and they've really clogged up the system with a lot of bad cases. Approval rates nationwide are plummeting from the judges. Many, many more cases are being denied. That's for a whole bunch of reasons. Some are legit. There's just a lot of cases that were filed that shouldn't. Some is a political shift in the people that have been appointed to be Social Security judges. Some is just because of the medical system.
Is there a limit? Is it like baseball, 3 strikes you're out? Is there a limit of how many times you can be denied and then you can never apply? Or could you apply from now till, kingdom come?
All right, so again, different answer for SSDI than from SSI. From SSDI, if you're denied and you exhaust your appeals, which could be all the way up through the U.S. Federal District Court, you can apply again as long as you're still insured under the Act. And that's that 5 years out of 10 years, eventually you're so far away from when you last paid into the FICA system that you lose your coverage. SSI, you can keep applying. Every new application starts a new period of benefits. Okay. The key to the listings for any cancer, if I see in the word distant metastases, that is that the cancer has metastasized beyond the regional area. So take breast cancer. If it's metastasized just to the lymph nodes under the arm, that's not considered a distant metastasis. If they find cancer cells elsewhere in the body, that is, and that meets the listings. So metastasis is really a significant finding. If there is surgery or there is treatment and the cancer is recurred, that will generally meet the listing. Those are the two main things in terms of the actual cancer that will almost always meet the listings. And there's a whole bunch. There's like 20 different cancer listings, so I don't have them all memorized. But this is generally what we're looking for when somebody calls us on a cancer case. The focus is also on that time period, documenting the symptoms. And we're going to talk more about that in just a moment. Yes, sir.
Can you speak some about leukemia?
Same issue. Basically, it's the same issues. Now, leukemia can meet the listings. I didn't bring my tablet in, so I don't have the leukemia listings in front of me. There is a listing for leukemia. It's difficult to meet. It all depends on the medical records. So I wish I had brought my tablet in. I was going to go out to the car and get it, and we'd already wired up with this microphone thing, so I didn't want to go out. So if you wait after that we talk, I can go out and get my tablet and pull it up on the internet and give you a very quick answer. But there is a listing for leukemia. I don't recall the exact requirements of it. I don't think leukemia falls under the compassionate allowances, though. We can double check that when we're done. I'll put that I have here, and I can pull that out.
What sort of weight does fatigue have and fatigue post-chemo in terms of making a case?
All symptoms become important. Just hold on to that for 1 second. We're going to come right back to that. Let's skip ahead. Let's go to page 10. And this is actually the most important page in the handout. So we've talked a lot about how difficult the program is, and it's intended to be difficult. This is not a gee, we feel sorry for you program. This is not a gee, we know you need help, so we're going to hold out our hand and help you program. This is either a prove you're permanently and totally disabled program and get benefits, or you don't. So it is difficult to win, but we can win cases. You don't have to run away and split. We can get cases improved. And it's really important that we get cases approved for a lot of reasons. First reason, our clients need the help. We want them to get this help. Another reason, frankly, it's the only way I get paid. Nobody gives me money up front. Nobody gives me a retainer. Nobody pays me hourly. Nobody gets a bill from me for my time. I only get paid if I win cases. So it's really important that we win cases. Let's talk about the keys. Number one key to winning a case. You must be going to the doctor. You must be going to the doctor. You must be going to the doctor. I can't say it enough. I tell every client when we first meet, what you say is not evidence because you want the money. What your husband says, oh, my wife, I feel so bad, is not evidence because he likes you. Only evidence that counts in a disability case are the clinical charts of the treating medical specialists. People like to think of their lawyer as a gunslinger. I hate that analogy. I've never shot a gun in my life other than a BB gun when I was a kid. I wouldn't know what to do with a gun if I had one except from John Wayne movies. I do like John Wayne movies, so I could probably figure it out. But I don't shoot bullets. I wouldn't know how. I shoot MRI reports. I shoot therapist notes. I shoot brain scans. I shoot Beck depression inventories. Those are my bullets. And if you don't go to the doctor, I don't have evidence. If I don't have evidence, I don't have a case. You must be going to the doctor. Rule number 2, there is a right way and a wrong way to go to the doctor. And because you're sitting right across from me, I'm going to pick on you. Give me a name. It can be yours or a made-up one. Susan. Okay. So we're not allowing people on the cameras to see Susan. And some of you have your backs to her, but you can't see Susan. But Susan has a really nice smile. And she's trying hard not to use it now because she's going to get embarrassed. But I've seen her laugh at some of my jokes. Susan is also my psychiatrist. And she's been treating me for quite some time, and she knows that I have a lot of pretty serious issues. But today is my day to go see Dr. Susan. And I know she has that nice smile. So what do I do today? Today is the day that I take a shower. And I put on a clean shirt. And I trim what can be trimmed, and I pat down what's left to be patted down. And I walk into Dr. Susan's office, and because I was raised with this positive mental attitude towards life that I got from my father, much same as many of you, when I walk into her office and she says, "Hi, Jeff, how are you today?" I answer her the same way you all answer, "I'm fine, Doc Susan, how are you?" What does she write down? Well-groomed, nice man says he's okay. Nothing else in that chart is going to be read by anybody at Social Security. Next month I come in. Now the shirt's a little wrinkled, and my eyes are red, and I'm looking a little distraught. I have this thing that psychiatrists call a flat affect. I always think of an iron. I don't know why, but it just means I'm looking sad. And she says, "Jeff, any new symptoms? Maybe we need to adjust your medications." What do I hear? Adjust my medications. Okay, I've been on Prozac. I've been on Wellbutrin. I've been on Seroquel. I like the Effexor. I don't want to go up and down and play this medication roller. No, Doc Susan. There's no new symptoms. Really, it was kind of a challenging week. The kid came home with a D on his report card, and the dog pooped on the carpeting, and I had a flat tire yesterday. Really, there are no new symptoms. What does she write down? Jeff says no new symptoms. Next month I come in, now I'm looking really bad. Clothes are a mess. Whatever's left of the hair is going in 3 directions. And as I walk into her office, she has to reach under her desk for that Febreze bottle that we all keep for some of those clients who aren't taking care of themselves. She gives it a couple squirts. And she says, "Hey, Jeff, I'm really a little concerned. Are you sure things are stable? Maybe we need to talk about that day hospitalization program over at Highland Park." What do I hear? Hospital. Been in Tinley, been in Reed, been in Madden. Not interested in another mental health hospital. No, really, docs, I'm stable, it's okay. It was just, had a flat tire, and the sheriff showed up, something stupid about child support. I don't even understand. I just slammed the door in his face. Really, no, things are stable. What does she write down? Jeff says he's stable. I lied. Now, I lied for valid reasons. I was being polite. I was being flirtatious. I didn't want new medicines. All valid reasons. 2 problems. Number 1, our doctors around here can be really, really good doctors, but they're really, really lousy mind readers. And if you don't talk about your fatigue, and if you don't talk about your pain, and if you don't talk about your depression, and if you don't talk about your inability to do the things that matter to you, she can't help you. And the chart is not going to reflect your symptoms and your truth. Most important thing that you need to do is tell your doctors the truth. They become better doctors because they have more facts. I have better evidence, better bullets, so to speak, because the chart contains what's really going on. A lot of guys don't like to talk about their pain. They don't like to say that they're fatigued or tired all the time, or that they can't take the garbage out anymore, or that they need their wife to bend down and tie their shoes for them. Or wives don't like to talk about that they can't pick up their babies. I had a woman in my office today, hurt her back. The baby's 18 months, 17 months. She hasn't lifted the baby since it was 3 months. She started crying just talking about that specific fact. But that's a reality. That's a symptom. That's evidence of how her symptoms impact her life. If she tells that to Dr. Susan, I've got evidence. If she hides it from Dr. Susan for whatever reason, it doesn't exist in the legal world. So, rule number 2, go to the doctors and tell the truth. Rule number 3, Social Security likes specialists. If you have a cancer problem, it's the oncologist. If that cancer problem results in depression, then it's a psychiatrist or a psychologist. It's not the family doctor giving Prozac. If you have a back problem, it's the orthopedic. If you have a lung problem, it's the pulmonary doctor. Unfortunately, family practice doctors get very little weight in the Social Security system. They really do prefer the specialists. So you must encourage people to be seeing those specialists. And then if mental health is an issue, and mental health is commonly an issue with people with chronic medical problems, it's a symptom, then they need to treat for it, both for their own health, for their family's sake, and so that I can prove it if it becomes a factor in their disability claim. Go to the doctor, communicate honestly, see the right doctors. That's how we generate the evidence to prove your case. If I make that point clear, this whole evening is worthwhile to me, because that makes a difference in people's lives. Let's turn a page. Go to page 11. Let's talk about the process. 3 ways to start a case. First and best way, apply online. SSA.gov. There's a button that says online application, I think it says online applications. Click on that. You'll find how to start a case. It'll take about an hour and a quarter, hour and a half. You want to have the name, address, and phone numbers of all your doctors that are treating you for your disabling conditions. You want a list of your medications. You want all the jobs you've had in the last 15 years, and the birth dates of all the children that you've had, and the names of all the partners that you've married. And that's how you get the case started. If you can't do it online, you can go to the Social Security office. That's the second best way to do it. The problem there is that they're very busy, and sometimes you're there for a long time, but you can get it filed there. If you can't do either of those, you can call Social Security's 1-800 number and make an appointment for a phone interview. They do get this right most of the time. I'll give them that. But usually after that phone call, it's 2 to 3 weeks out to get the phone interview, and then you've got to wait for it to be typed and mailed and signature and signed. You have to send it back. You're just delaying the processing of your case. Filing online, fast, easy, get it done. And then what happens is Social Security drops you, because they don't handle the processing of cases at the first 2 levels. They actually subcontract this out to every state. So in Illinois, the state agency that actually processes cases at the first 2 levels is called BDDS, Bureau of Disability Determination Services, and your file is zipped there on the computer lines, and it goes to a person called an adjudicator. Nice people, way overworked and overstressed. Their job, they write to the doctors, the hospitals, the therapists, the clinics, they gather in all the paper, and they send to you what we call in our practice the killer form. My personal preference, for several reasons, I want to be hired before you complete the Activities of Daily Living questionnaire. That's anywhere from an 8 to a 16-page form, depending on which one the adjudicator sends out. Courts have said all the doctors can say you're totally disabled, but if you answer that form inartfully and they can twist your answers to show, oh, look at all the things she's doing, your case can be denied just on the basis of how you answer that ADL form. So we will never answer that form for clients. We don't lead your lives. But we will read your answers and do the best we can to make sure that they can't be twisted into saying or being interpreted into saying something that you didn't really mean. The adjudicators gather all these papers and medical records. They turn them over to these invisible state agency physicians. 33 years doing Social Security work, I've never met a state agency physician. I imagine a guy sitting hunkered over a desk with a pen and a beam of light with lightning going outside his window. And basically these guys read medical charts and they check off boxes. This guy can lift 10 pounds, this guy can lift 50 pounds. This guy has a mild impairment in concentration, this person has a marked impairment in social functioning, and that's how these cases are decided by non-examining, non-treating doctors down in Springfield who check off boxes. In Illinois, this first level takes, on average, about 90 days. They approve 35% of the cases, 65% get rejected. If you get rejected, you get a letter saying we are denying your application for Social Security disability benefits. You read down a couple of paragraphs. It'll say, if you disagree with our decision, you have 60 days to file a request for reconsideration. Don't wait 60 days. Nothing is gained by waiting 60 days except you let hundreds of people get their cases in ahead of you, and you've lost 2 months in processing time. Get online, go on the website, file your appeal. That form takes you about 20 minutes. Get it done that first day, and you save 2 months in processing time. Once you do that, zip, back down to Springfield, back down to BDDS, back to a new adjudicator. He writes to the doctors, the hospitals, the clinics. They have a new trick, new over the last few years. They now will sometimes send you a new ADL form because they want you to answer this one differently than you answered the first one. We just write, see the first one, and send it back to them. 11% of the cases in Illinois get paid at reconsideration. 89% get denied. This used to take about another 90 days because of sequestration and the lack of adequate funding of the Social Security Administration from Congress. Last year in Illinois, that went to about 280 days. It delayed thousands and thousands and thousands of people from getting their benefits. If you lose at reconsideration, you get a letter saying we have denied your request for reconsideration. Read down a couple of paragraphs, and it says if you disagree with our decision, you have 60 days to file your request for hearing before an administrative law judge. What's my next line?
No.
Don't wait 60 days. Get that appeal on file right away. You've saved another 2 months, and I kept my promise to you at the beginning of the talk when I told you how we'd save 4 months in processing time. You file those appeals immediately, your case gets processed much more quickly. Anybody that you know, that you believe and whose doctors will support are entitled to these benefits, you want to encourage all the way to the administrative law judge level. The reason for that, this is the only time that you ever get to go face-to-face with the decision maker. Everything up to this point, phone and paper. Everything after this point, paper. The only time you get to see and talk to the decision maker is when you go to the hearing before the Social Security Administrative Law Judge. These are informal hearings that observe some formalities. I'm not Perry Mason. These are not Perry Mason type cases. These are not Jack McCoy type cases. These are not even People Court type cases. What's your first name? Angie. These cases are all about Angie and Angie's limitations and Angie's frustrations. And why is Angie, with this good work history, who's such a nice lady, coming before some judge to ask for a few $100 to support her family? The judge is going to read the medical records. He's got a training to some extent in how to do that. Sometimes they bring a doctor in to testify against us. Sometimes they bring a job expert in to testify against us. But this is the best chance to get cases approved because it's the only time you go in front of a non-Social Security employee. These judges are not Social Security employees technically, who will make a decision on your case. Yes?
A question. So when you work, okay, like most people when they retire or whatever, and they draw their disability, okay, I'm hoping I'm saying the right term, or receive disability. So is the benefit according to how much you have paid into it, or is there a limit where you can only get $1,100 almost?
No, the benefit is based upon how much you pay into the system.
Okay, so
It's a computer formula.
okay, so is there a cutoff like how unemployment does?
No.
Oh, really?
No, I mean, well, okay, so is there a cutoff? So let me answer that a little more precisely. Social Security taxes for retirement and disability are paid on the first, I believe it's this year, if there's an accountant in the room, they'll correct me, I think $117,000 worth of earnings. So the formula is sort of capped because you don't pay taxes on earnings greater than that amount. The most I've seen recently somebody get, and this was somebody who had maxed out that number for many years, was about $2,400. The number I used earlier, that $1,170, that's a nationwide average. Because some people's small earnings get much less than that, and then some people get much greater. It's never going to replace working, and it's never going to be a comfortable way for anybody to live. That's why sometimes when you hear this nonsense that comes from Congress about this program, you just have to shake your head. Judges approve nationally. Well, I haven't seen statistics recently, but they were a little over 60%, which was a drop. And I am sure that's dropping now. But it's still a far greater percentage than are paid at reconsideration. So lots of cases can be approved at the hearings as long as people go in with good medical support and are prepared for their hearing. If we lose in front of the administrative law judge, we can appeal to the appeals council. They're in Falls Church, Virginia. You do not see them. You do not talk to them. They read the medical charts that were given to the judge, they audit the tape that was made at the time of the hearing, and they make their decision on that basis. Only a tiny percentage of cases are remanded or reversed by the appeals council. The vast bulk of the time, they support the administrative law judge. It takes about a year to get a decision from the appeals council after the administrative law judge decision. Yes, sir?
How many appeals do you have?
This is the process. This is what we're talking right now. These are all the steps. If you can't win in front of the appeals council, you are then entitled to sue the Commissioner of Social Security in U.S. District Court. But you do not get a trial. You do not get to testify. You do not get to see or talk to the federal court judge. It's all based upon a transcript of the hearing before the administrative law judge and the medical evidence that was presented to the administrative law judge. The point here is that administrative law judge hearing is the key. It's the fulcrum. Everything revolves around that particular hearing. That's why you want the strongest possible case by the time you see the administrative law judge. Getting cases approved or remanded back after that level are very, very time-consuming and happen at a very small percentage. So that hearing is the key. That's why, for example, in my practice, we want to get involved right when somebody files their application, because we have this same discussion we're having here tonight to some extent with every single new client, so that by the time we get through the initial application and get through reconsideration and appear before a judge, we have them going to the doctors, we have them going to the right doctors, and more importantly, we have them communicating so that we have that evidence for the administrative law judge hearing. Yes?
Would you please redefine BDDS?
Bureau of Disability Determination Services. It's just where the adjudicators work. Other states just call it DDS. I don't know why we added the B in Illinois. Let's skip ahead. Let's go to page 13 and let's shift gears, because I'm sure this applies to some people here. We won. You're getting benefits. You were entitled to these benefits. What happens next? Everybody on Social Security Disability Insurance and SSI are going to get reviewed. Congress has given Social Security billions of dollars to do nothing but do these continuing disability reviews. And I don't have a problem with continuing disability reviews because some people do get better. If they get better, they should go back to work. The test for a continuing disability review is there medical evidence of medical improvement sufficient to allow you to return to work? So let's pick on you. What's your name? Patrick. So I represented Patrick, and he's a stubborn guy. So I had to yell at him, go to the doctor, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. He went to the doctor. We won his case. He stopped. He stopped because I wasn't there to nudge him anymore. He stopped because the doctor said, hey, I can't help you anymore. He stopped because the doctor moved. Whatever reason, he stopped. He's a relatively young guy. He's going to get reviewed. You never know when, a year, 2 years. And he gets a phone call from a guy down in Springfield. Hey, Patrick, I'm the adjudicator. I'm doing a continuing disability review, and I need to talk to your doctor to see if there's evidence of medical improvement. Who's your doctor? And Patrick says, well, I haven't been to the doctor in a year. And a big smile comes to the Social Security guy's face. He says, no problem. I'll send you to one of ours. And he's going to have a 15-minute consultative examination where he's going to get on the table and off the table. He's going to walk heel to toe. He's going to say, how many fingers am I holding up and the difference between an apple and an orange, and he's going to be found totally disabled. I'm sorry. He's not going to. He's going to be found to have medical improvement and no longer totally disabled. Rule. For the people that you know who are on Social Security disability and SSI, they must be going to the doctor. We want them to get better, and if they're not getting better, we have to have the evidence to document it. Yes?
Would that be the same for someone who has Down syndrome or something like that, that is a permanent?
So everybody gets coded on what their internal expectations are for the likelihood of medical improvement. So somebody with Down syndrome or autism is not going to get coded for a serious review. They'll just do a paper review. Part of it is just to make sure the people are still alive and things like that. But there are a lot of conditions. I mean, breast cancer is a perfect example of one where maybe the symptomology lasts more than 12 months. It might be lymphedema that got really bad or something like that. They do expect that to improve in the future, and they will get checked done. But let's go one more step. Let's say that you're on SSDI or SSI, and you are getting better, and you want to go back to work, but you don't want to screw up. So how do you go back to work on Social Security and protect yourself? All right, so the first question always is, are you on SSDI or on SSI? Let's start out with people on SSDI. They have 3 benefits if they're on SSDI and want to go back to work. Number 1 is a very cool benefit, and it's called the trial work period. Now, the trial work period says you can work, make as much money as you can, $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, $4,000 a month, and you can still keep your Social Security disability check. So you got money coming in from all different directions. It's a very nice time. You're allowed 9 trial work period months where you can work and still get your disability check, but it's not 9 months in a row. It's 9 months in any 60-month slice of time or any 5-year block. So let's take an example to help you, okay? I saw the look on your face. So let's say I go on disability in 2002. I work 3 months in 2004, 3 months in 2006, and 3 months in 2008. Between 2004 and 2008 is less than 5 years, and I've worked 9 months. I've used up my trial work period. Let's say now I went on disability in 2002. I worked 3 months in 2003, 3 months in 2005, and 3 months in 2009. By 2009, those months I worked in 2003 are outside of the 5-year block of time. They've fallen off. They don't count anymore.
So it starts all over.
Every 5, you look at 5-year slices of time. So the key for Jennifer here is if somebody comes here and says, hey, I'm on Social Security disability, how many months can I work in my trial work period and still get my check? Her answer is going to be, I don't know. Because she doesn't know how many months that person might have worked last year or 2 years ago or 4 years ago. Work for trial work period purposes has a different definition, because why should they make this easy? You use up one trial work period month this year for any month in which you earn at least $770 gross in the month. Last year it was $750. The year before that it was less. Let me just finish. You can earn $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, it just uses up 1 month. But if you make $770, you've used up one trial work period month. Yes, ma'am, I'm sorry.
And it's determined by the length of time, not necessarily the number of days that you work.
It's determined by cash received, and it's gross income before taxes. So if you are particularly talented and you work 3 days and you make $1,000, you've used up one trial work period month.
Don't you have to apply? Won't they automatically, it'll be like a red flag and they'll cut down they'll cut off the check?
Nope.
That's what they said on the phone.
Nope. Not at this point. No. That's absolutely not true. So whoever said that, that's why we don't use phones in Social Security. Once you've used up your 9 months, it will, however, or should, it doesn't always, trigger a continuing disability review. Now, you still might be totally disabled because you might have found a sympathetic job, you might have found a job that accommodates you. You still may be very well not have had sufficient medical improvement to be terminated from the program. So if you can find a job, you try it. But you have a second benefit. See, that 9 months is kind of scary for somebody who's been totally disabled, because 9 months you could go into a remission, symptoms can be minimized for a while, a new medicine might be helping for a while, but things do ebb and wane. So we have a second benefit that's on the next page, page 15, and that's called the extended period of eligibility. That says, okay, we know you've used up your trial work period. You've managed 9 months worth of work in some 5-year slice of time. If you continue to work and now make at least $1,070 gross in a month, we're not going to give you any more checks. But if at any time in the next 3 years you become unable to make $1,070 gross in a month, right back on the program, no questions asked. You could have a new condition, you could have a relapse of your old condition, the company could close because of the economy. But if you're within 3 years of the end of your trial work period and you have not been terminated for medical improvement, you go right back on the program, no questions asked. If you stay under $1,070, which I never recommend because nobody should be living with the government looking over their shoulder, but if you continually stay under $1,070 gross in a month, you just keep getting your checks. Now, there's a third benefit for people on SSDI that want to go back to work, and that's extended Medicare. So, remember, you get Medicare kicks in 29 months after your onset date. You get to keep Medicare for the whole 9-month trial work period. You get to keep Medicare for the whole 3-year extended period of eligibility, even if you're not getting benefits anymore because you're earning over $1,070 a month. You get to keep Medicare for another 4.5 years after that. So somebody on SSDI can keep Medicare for almost over 8.5 years after they return to the workforce. That was intended to eliminate the pre-existing condition limitation in health insurance coverage. Now, with the Affordable Care Act, that's eliminated. So I don't know where Congress is going to go with the extended Medicare in the future. They haven't gotten to that point yet. But it's an important benefit, and it makes a big difference to people on SSDI who want to go back to work. Yes?
When we used to get checks, it said, I'm just asking if SSI-D is the same thing as SSD-I.
I have no idea. No. The answer is no. There's Social Security disability insurance. It's one. Supplemental security income is the other.
Yes, it was SSI and
Okay.
dash D. Disability.
I don't know what the dash D means, but
Well,
it doesn't matter if it's
is
SSI.
this?
Yes.
SSID is the same as SSDI.
No.
Wonderful.
All right, so let's go backwards. Remember in the very beginning we talked about SSDI is worked and paid FICA taxes and became totally disabled. SSI is you didn't do that, you're indigent, and you became totally disabled. I'm assuming, and I don't know what this dash D is, but I'm assuming you're referring to SSI, and we haven't talked about how to go back to work on SSI yet. The rules are different. Okay, and that also makes some sense. So now let's go back to what you asked me before. You said the lady on the phone said your check will be cut off if you go back to work. So let's talk about going back to work on SSI, because this is probably what she meant. If you are on SSI, remember we said SSI's means tested, assets and income count. When you start working, you have income. So they apply a math formula to that. Let's assume you're getting the base SSI check of $721 a month. When you go to work on SSI, they take your monthly earnings, they ignore the first $85. So $85 off the top they won't factor in. The balance, they reduce your next month's SSI by $1 for every $2 that you earn. So let's pretend that somebody is getting $721 in SSI. They go and do Mary Kay work, and they make $285 selling Mary Kay. You ignore the first $85. That goes off to the side, doesn't count. You have $200 remaining. It's a 1-for-2 reduction. So that means $100, half of that $200 balance, will be deducted from the next month's SSI. So instead of getting $721 in the next month, she'll get $621. But still, $621 plus the $285 is still $900, and it's far better than the $721 she was getting on SSI. So it's always better to work. Now, here's where people goof up. When you are on SSDI or SSI, you are obligated to report changes in circumstances to the government. Going back to work, getting married, moving. How do you report? Well, the way most people report is they dial the 800 number and they talk to Mrs. Smith. They can actually hear Mrs. Smith typing in the information. Is Mrs. Smith typing in the information, or is she typing a letter to her sister? You'll never know, and you cannot prove you reported on the telephone to Mrs. Smith. So reporting by telephone is not acceptable. The best ways to report changes, going back to work, address changes, one of two ways. Certified mail return receipt requested. Dear Social Security, here are my check stubs for June 2014. Love, Jeff. And I get the green card back, and I have my copy of the letter, and I throw it in a big stack in the drawer, but at least I know it's there if I need it, and I can prove I reported. Or fax the information to Social Security and keep the fax receipt. Sending it by regular mail, can't prove they got it. But you are obligated to report, especially if you're on SSI and go back to work, because every month's check will be affected by your earnings from the prior month. Yes, sir.
I forgot to report it to Social Security. Is there a time frame? I mean, I got it like 8 months ago. I forgot to report it.
Bless you.
Tax on the amount. I got proof how much I made, but it was like cash money. It wasn't I didn't get some taken out. I mean, is there a time frame?
No, I would do it now, though, because you're still within the 9-month trial work period. So if you're on SSDI. Now, if you're on SSI, you'll already be in an overpayment situation. Then I would report it now. So I would make a copy of your earnings or create a statement of your earnings and fax it over to the local office. Yes, sir. Okay. Turn the page. Let's go page 17. Yes, sir. Sure.
Scenario where I was became disabled, long-term disability from my employer required that I also apply for Social Security disability, which allowed me to get half the check from them, half from Social Security disability. Want to get rid of the long-term disability from my employer due to reasons of they'll change my benefits and pension situation. Does that affect Social Security benefits?
No. Social Security affects the long-term disability. Long-term disability doesn't have an impact on Social Security. Nope, you'll still get the same check, same amount, same cost of living adjustments. Go to page 17. You've got my website there, RabinSSLaw.com. We're coming out with a new version hopefully next week, but I'm very proud of the website. We put a lot of time and effort into it. We've tried to put a lot of information on the website. There's a lot of videos on the website. This video hopefully will go up on the website at some point. So if you have questions, you can often get answers there. You can email us right off of that website. You can, if you see things or don't see things that you think should be on there, please let me know and we'll do our best to add it. Like us on Facebook and Twitter, because my computer guys say that, please, we do have a Facebook page and a Twitter account, and if you like us, Google likes it when you like us, and Google's important to everybody in business. Social Security's website, ssa.gov. It's a very good website. We actually do a lot of our own legal research off of that website. You can get a lot of information off that site. You should also join it. There's a way to join the Social Security website, and then you can get copies of your earnings record. Remember, you used to get that in the mail all the time. Social Security stopped that because of the cost, but you can generate that form by becoming a member of the Social Security website. On the very last page, our main office is in Des Plaines, right down the street. I grew up in this area. Our family lives in this area. I also have offices up in Libertyville, downtown Chicago, down south in Joliet, and one out west in Winfield. We work however it works best for our clients. So if you need us, you call us. My email is on that page. I get lots and lots of questions by email. We're always willing to help out. Yes, sir.
Two questions. You said at the beginning you would tell us the one time you should call Social Security?
That's if you can't apply in person or on the computer. It's the only time.
And if you're doing the compassionate whatever, would you recommend completing the application online and then printing it and going to the Social Security office?
No. Once you complete it online, it gets zipped into their process. So you want to bypass that. If you're going to do a compassionate allowance, you want to go to the local office. Now, the way I recommend you go to the local office, by the way, is go at 8:30 in the morning and bring a friend. The office opens at 9, so you want to be there before the office opens and be in line because the line gets really long really quick. And you always go with somebody for a couple of reasons. First and main reason is, remember, you're disabled and you're on medicines. And this stuff gets really confusing. So if you have another set of ears there, it makes it a lot easier for you. The other thing is when you have another set of ears there, the person on the other side of the table is always more careful.
What information do you bring with you, like work stubs, check stubs?
No, sir. They have all that on the computer. What you need to bring is your birth certificate because for some reason they don't believe you were born. So you need to bring your birth certificate. You need to have, and if you don't have it right away, you can still apply, but they are going to want it, the original. You need to have a list of all the doctors, hospitals, therapists that have taken care of you. We usually say go 12 months prior to your onset date forward. That's a general rule. If it's like a mental health condition, sometimes going back further is important. Bring a list of your medicines and bring a list of the jobs you've had the last 15 years. If you are married, make sure you know your wife's date of birth. And Social Security number. If you've been divorced, make sure you know the date of your divorce and your ex-spouse's name. That's really all you need to get the case started. Yes, sir.
Can there be attachments against your Social Security check?
Great question that a litigator friend of mine has been asking. And we did some research, and it looks like the answer in Illinois is this. The Social Security check itself cannot be garnished. That's protected. Except from student loans. Except from student loans. I think that's the main exception. However, if you collect Social Security benefits that happen in my friend's case, and you leave it accumulated in the bank account, that it's accumulated, then it loses its protection in Illinois. So he's in a family law situation. And so the question is the money in that bank account garnishable for paying his ex-spouse's attorney's fees? And it looks like it is. I gave him some ideas, but I think we're going to lose on that one. Not me, I'm not involved. He just asked for my help. So the check itself cannot be garnished. Social Security doesn't want to be getting letters from every debtor or every creditor for every single person on disability and be sending checks out all over. So that's protected. If it accumulates into a savings account, then it can lose its protection. Student loans grab everything. Student loans are very powerful when it comes to creditors and banks. When we were in law school and studying for the bar exam, you take the bar exam review program, and the professor says, if you have no idea what the answer is, just write down the bank always wins, and you stand a good chance of at least getting a point for having the right answer. Yes, sir, go ahead.
Friends of mine have disability. Talk about getting back pay between the time you apply and the time you start getting Social Security. Is there certain petition when you can get that or you can't get it?
So as I discussed before, SSDI benefits go from the date of onset or begin being calculated from the date of onset, but no more than 1 year prior to the date of application. SSI begins the month after the month you file. Okay. Yes?
Referring back to our off-topic information that you gave, if you with SSI, you can. What I understood you to say was that you could have an IRA, and those dollars would not stop you from getting the Medicaid card, but an income over $15,800 would.
That's under the Affordable Care Act. So that's not under the Social Security program. That's just for Medicaid, and that's only in Illinois and in the states that have adopted the expanded Medicaid program.
So it has nothing to do with the SSI, but it has something to do with the Medicaid card.
Correct. That's a good way of putting it. I'm leaving some things up here. They include pens, because when you have a father-in-law who sells tchotchkes as part of his living, you buy pens. Bert's a great guy. Brochures that talk a lot about what we've said. Here are the article, or the printout from, this is right from Social Security's website with the compassionate allowances. And the last thing that I'm leaving here are, I think we're really screwing up the planet, and I think that has a lot to do with a lot of our health problems. I think one of the problems we have is too much plastic. So we have grocery bags. So don't use plastic at the grocery store. Take as many as you want and use the bags.
Trash bags.
Sorry. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a question. Your firm seems, mainly in this meeting, was discussing about how to get disability, Social Security benefits.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other things that your firm will also help with? Maybe employer benefits, long-term benefits, or anything like that? Or are you?
So many years ago, I did general practice before I decided to just focus in on this. And the reason I chose to focus in one area of the law is I found out when I was doing general practice, there was always a guy who was smarter than me, because that was all he did. And I got tired of not being smarter than the other guy, so I decided to be really good in one thing, so we just focus in this. However, because my clients have so many issues in their lives, we've built up a pretty good network of attorneys that we trust that do other things. So ERISA cases against long-term disability carriers, personal injury, wills, real estate, family law. I have a pretty good list of people around the Chicago metropolitan area that I know will do a good job. So if you need a referral, you can always call me or email me, and if I know somebody, I will tell you. If not, I will let you know. But in our terms of our own practice, we decided we wanted to be what I consider the best possible practitioner in our area of law, and so we just focus on this.
I kind of have a question, kind of similar to his, about the benefit with your employer and receiving benefits from Social Security. Now, from my understanding, what my insurance is saying to me, so if I would receive benefits from Social Security with a disability, if they even get me on disability, the money that I'm receiving from my insurance through long-term disability, if it's not as much as disability going to give me, then they're going to pay the difference.
Okay, so let's take a different example. Let me see if this works.
He also told me that the long-term disability guy says that if the benefits, if I do get the benefits, and from the time they made me apply for it, I would have to give that money back to them because they consider it as income. Or like, say, for instance, if you're in a car accident, you receive some type of money, you have to turn that money back to them?
Depends on the policy, but the general answer is yes. So let's take an example. So I'm going to use make-up numbers. So let's pretend you are making $100,000 a year and you become totally disabled, and you have a corporate long-term disability plan that says we're going to pay you 60% of your annual income. So that's $60,000 a year. So, this worked out perfect. So that's $5,000 a month. Let's pretend your Social Security benefit is $1,800 a month. It takes you a year, but you get your Social Security approved. What will happen is instead of giving you $5,000 a month like they were, the long-term disability company is now going to give you $3,200. So you get $32 from the one and $18 from Social Security, so you're still getting the $5,000 a month. Now, because they paid you for that full year, the full $5,000 a month, that your Social Security disability case was pending, the back benefits that you get from Social Security have to be reimbursed to the long-term disability carrier. And they generally make you sign a contract saying that you're going to do that. Now, you don't have to, but if you don't, then what will happen is instead of getting $3,200 a month, they'll reduce your benefits until they recoup that overpayment. They call it an overpayment in their lingo. They will reduce the amount of back benefits that you have to give them by the amount of the attorney's fee if you choose to use one of their attorneys. So there's no real impact on you from hiring a private attorney. But that's how they send out. There are some, so I can go give you a really, really complete answer, more than you bargained for. There are really good reasons that you want to be on Social Security disability, even if you are collecting long-term disability. The primary reason, well, there's several. One is the cost of living increases. Even if it's not a lot, you get to keep those. The long-term disability carrier will not annually reduce what you get by the cost of living. So that 3%, 4%, 2%, whatever it is, you'll get to keep that. Medicare is important. A huge benefit that people don't understand is you protect your retirement account when you go on Social Security disability. So let's explain. No, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about Social Security retirement. So let's take you as an example, and I'm going to predict, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, excuse me, but I'm going to predict you're 40 years old. Well, we're going to say 40 years old. So let's say you go on Social Security disability, or you go on corporate long-term disability today. You decide not to mess with Social Security. When you hit 65, you're going to have 25 years where you didn't work and pay into the system, factored into your retirement benefit. So instead of getting a retirement benefit here, when they factor in those 25 years, your retirement benefit's going to be here, and you'll have lost this much money every month for the rest of your life. When you go on Social Security disability insurance, they freeze your benefit amount. So your Social Security disability check is basically the same as your retirement check. Every year you get the cost of living increase. When you hit retirement age, they ignore the 25 years you didn't work because you've been on Social Security disability benefits, and they give you your full retirement benefit. So me getting people Social Security disability not only gets them a monthly check now, but it protects their retirement benefit from Social Security for the rest of their life. It's a benefit nobody understands or appreciates except those of us that do the work.
How does already being retired and on Medicare affect SSDI and SSI application?
Well, SSDI ends at retirement age. For SSI, if your retirement benefit is below $721 a month and you can prove you're totally disabled, then you can get a bump up in your SSI, in your retirement check up to the SSI amount.
So the monies actually count as not as work income, but as regular income, or the Social Security check.
Your Social Security check is considered income for SSI purposes. It's not work. And you still have to meet the asset and incomes test.
How do you make your money?
Really hard. So we get paid if we win. Our fee is based upon the back benefit check. It's 25% of the retroactive check. 25%, but it's capped by the commissioner at a maximum in most cases of $6,000. So it's 25% of the back benefit check or $6,000, whichever's less. So if your back benefits, for example, are $2,000, our fee is $500. Social Security holds it out. They charge an $89 handling fee, and they send it to us. So our clients don't have to write checks out for our fees. The only thing we ask clients to do is we will advance the cost of medical records and reports, and if we do advance those monies and we win, we ask the clients to reimburse that to us just dollar for dollar so we can turn that money around and use it in the next person's case.
So if you're considering applying for disability, would you recommend them going to see you before you do anything?
So my yes, is my, so I'll give a longer answer. There's two theories on when to hire a lawyer or any representative in a disability case. The street theory is file, get denied, and get a lawyer. There's two general reasons for that street theory. One is some people get paid, so why pay the attorney's fee? Right, but some people screw up their case at the first level, or they lose months of time when they could be building their case, so that may not be worth what the attorney's fee is. The real reason why people are being told get denied and come back is because of attorneys do that because of how we're paid. So let's say, for example, let's take what I told you today. I fall today and I get hurt. I'm brain damaged. I'm clearly disabled. Well, if I'm the attorney and I take on my case, I'm going to get that case paid in 30 days. Well, there's a 5-month waiting period, so there's no back benefits. There's no fee. I did that case for free. Or if there's only a couple of months, I could be doing it for a very small fee. So some attorneys don't like to take those cases because the fees are so small. In my office, we take those cases. Because if I can win a case and I do it for free or I do it for a small fee, that client loves me so much they're going to send me 5 more cases. So we take cases, we want cases as soon as people apply. My belief is the earlier I get involved in the case, the better the chance of success, because we teach clients how to communicate with their doctors. We make sure they're treating for all of their problems, because this guy over here doesn't want to treat for his depression, but his wife says his depression's really bad, so we convince him to treat for his depression. We make sure that the activities of daily living questionnaire isn't going to be twisted and distorted by somebody down in Springfield. So there are things that we bring that are we think value added to the application to make sure the case is even stronger. So yes, what we'll generally tell people is make sure your doctor is supportive, because if your doctor isn't supportive, there isn't a case. So once you're sure that your doctor is supportive.
So do you approach them with that question?
I don't. I tell my client to. Absolutely. Doc?
So you're just upfront?
Yeah, because they're going to get a whole bunch of paperwork and they're going to get really annoyed. But yes, because if they're going to say you can work, you're not going to win. And some doctors will. Some doctors just don't believe they're, could believe you're not totally disabled and be very legitimately honest about it.
If someone applies and it's all approved and they're getting their disability, and then they decide to move to Florida or wherever because they're living in a different state, will that sometimes affect their...
Have no impact at all. Just make sure you report the move to Social Security.
How about if you moved before? Are there states that pay more?
No. So let me rephrase that. So there are definitely difference in approval rates between hearing offices around the country. There are differences in approval rates between the hearing office in Orland Park and the hearing office in Evanston. Some of these national firms that I have real opinions about will actually guide their marketing just to those territories that have hearing offices that pay a higher percentage because that's where they want their clients to come from. So the answer is it's not usually by state, it's usually by hearing office. Generally, though, without being real specific, you can guess the kind of personalities that live in different states, and those are where those judges tend to go. So you will find a lower approval rating generally, say, in New Mexico, although Albuquerque pays very high. The rest of the state doesn't. I don't know all these because I limit my practice really to Chicago now. But there are areas where there are lower approval rates than there are in other parts of the country. Yes, sir.
Is there a difference in eligibility for disability based on full-time or part-time? Do you have to be able to work full-time if you say, well, look, I can work, but I'm only working part-time?
So just so it comes out clear on the video, the question was, what's the difference in this analysis between full-time work and part-time work? So that can play different things. So when you are applying, if you are doing part-time work and you're still well under that $1,070 a month, we tell people if you need to work while you're applying, try to keep your earnings around $600 to $700 gross in a month because most judges for SSDI purposes will ignore that. For SSI, it'll still wipe out most of your benefit because of it's an offset as an earning, as income. But if you work part-time, generally you're okay. If you're on SSDI and you go to work and you're earning under $770 gross in a month, it doesn't even count as a trial work period. So it depends where you're at in the process, and it depends on how much you're earning. And remember, it's always gross earnings. Okay. Someone else had their hand up. Yes.
So you get Illinois disability and can live in any state and still get that?
Okay, this has nothing to do with Illinois. This is a federal program. So it doesn't matter what state you're living in, the benefits are the same.
A lot.
No, it doesn't matter. No, California and I think Massachusetts have an SSI supplement where they actually give you a little extra. I'm not sure if that's still true. I know it used to be. California does have its own disability plan for the first year to help people while these cases are pending. So that's actually a really good benefit. But it doesn't matter where you live.
Why do they want to know where you live all the time, especially in their evaluations?
They want to know where to send the check. Yeah, but they still want to know. They still want to know. Well, so here's a better. I gave you sort of a facetious answer. Let me give you a better answer. SSI is means tested. Assets and income make a difference. If you're living rent-free, say in your parents' house or in your kid's house, that's considered income, and they automatically reduce your check by a third. So if you're living in somebody else's house, you need to have a rental obligation in order that your benefit not be automatically reduced by a third. That's a more serious issue.
And does that matter what state you're in?
And even if you go out of the country too, if you move back like in different countries?
SSI won't follow you out of the country. SSDI will.
Is it automatically taken just because you live with a parent or a child or whatever? Like, if you can show, you're paying them a rent to live in their house, do they still reduce your income?
No. If you have you have to have the rental obligation. So generally, if I have, say, a 25-year-old bipolar child living with his parents, then we have the parents give Social Security letters saying that we're charging our son now $250 a month room and board, and we will wait to collect it until the SSI is approved, and that way the child gets the full SSI. Now, that has to be filed with Social Security, or the best practice is to file it with Social Security at the time of the application. If you do it later, then they're going to say, okay, you're just playing games with us just trying to get the full benefit amount. Another reason why we like getting hired at the very beginning of a case in the SSI cases. Guys, thanks a lot for letting me come out here. Jennifer and the Cancer Wellness Center, thank you very, very much for having me out tonight.